Welcome back to WNBA Hoopline TV. I need you to lock in, cut off every distraction, and really pay attention, because what we're about to break down doesn't just question a decision. It puts the entire coaching approach of Carl Lawson and Team USA under microscope. This wasn't simply about winning a game. It was about how Caitlin Clark was handled on the biggest stage. Instead of letting her control the offense as a primary playmaker, she was pushed into an unnatural role, forced into physically demanding defensive matchups against bigger players, and kept away from her natural perimeter position, which disrupted the team's rhythm, spacing, and overall offensive efficiency. It created mismatches, drained her energy, and limited her ability to fully operate as the offensive engine she's known to be. But even with all those limitations, she still found ways to impact the game, and that's where the biggest miscalculation happened. Because when you're dealing with generational talent like Clark, you can try to contain her, you can try to reduce her role, but you can't completely take away her influence on the floor.
Her first action, her first competitive action in over 8 months. In over 8 months, the first time she hits the floor in games that mean something, Caitlin Clark outperforms the rest of the team. Caitlin Clark shows her value.
You need this reality to truly sink in. After being away from competitive basketball for over 8 months, while veteran players stayed busy in off-season leagues, Caitlin Clark stepped onto the international stage and immediately reclaimed control of the game. She outperformed an entire experienced roster, and the difference was undeniable. When she was on the floor, the offense flowed with purpose, spacing, and precision, but the moment she was sent to the bench, everything stalled. Without her directing the tempo, the half-court offense broke down. Possessions were wasted and efficiency dropped, but as soon as she returned, the entire system transformed. Pace increased, opportunities opened up, and stagnant plays turned into fast break chances. It wasn't just performance, it was control of the game itself. Her impact was so clear that even international evaluators had to recognize it, as she earned MVP honors for the World Cup qualifying tournament, doing it all despite the limitations placed on her role, raising serious questions about the coaching decisions of Carl Lawson and how a player of that level was utilized.
Number 1 in points, number 1 in assists, number 1 in true shooting percentage, number 1 in plus minus, number 1 in 2-point field goal
Listen to
percentage.
that.
Listen to the numbers. This wasn't just dominance. It was total statistical control. Caitlin Clark finished number 1 in points, assists, and overall plus minus, but the most shocking metric was her leading 2-point field goal percentage. Let that really sink in. A 24-year-old perimeter guard, constantly labeled as someone who relies only on deep threes, outperformed elite frontcourt players like Angel Reese and De'Erica Hamby in interior efficiency, shooting a scorching 52% from the field and dominating in the paint against true bigs. That's not just impressive. It completely dismantles the narrative built around her game. She didn't just beat the scouting report. She erased it, proving her ability to adapt and score efficiently at every level despite physical matchups designed to slow her down. And in that moment, serious questions were raised about the decisions made by Carl Lawson, as the gap between Clark's production and her role became impossible to ignore, exposing flaws in a system that seemed unprepared to fully utilize a player of her caliber.
NBA deal in league history. Aneka Ogwumike goes on to say, "We're just really grateful to be able to come to a deal. We're proud of ourselves, and quite frankly, we always told you all we were going to stand on."
You need to fully understand how massive this moment really was. After more than 100 hours of tense deadlock negotiations, with the season timeline in serious danger, the WNBA and the Players Association suddenly reached a verbal agreement on a new collective bargaining deal just weeks before tip-off. The timing wasn't random. It came right after the global impact created by Caitlin Clark, from MVP recognition to surging viewership and attention around the game. That shift changed the entire leverage dynamic. What looked like a prolonged standoff quickly turned into a resolution, once both sides recognized what was at stake financially and structurally. The pressure of potentially losing momentum, disrupting the season, and impacting future growth made compromise inevitable. But despite the agreement, the underlying tension remains, as questions continue about player value, league economics, and how much influence one transformational talent can have on the direction of the entire sport.
Keep those people on threads away from me. After prolonged labor battle, the WNBA and WNBA Players Association reached a verbal agreement on the terms of a new collective bargaining agreement early Wednesday, just 51 days before the league's 30th.
Listen to the absolute unapologetic arrogance radiating from that specific statement, because what we just heard was not confidence, it was not leadership, and it certainly was not a display of genuine business intelligence. It was something far more revealing and far more concerning. It was a carefully constructed illusion of authority built on top of a narrative that completely collapses the moment you apply even the most basic level of analytical scrutiny. When individuals step in front of a global audience and boldly declare that they stood on business, they are making a claim that carries a very specific meaning in the real world. Business is not about seniority. It is not about politics. And it is not about who's been around the longest. Business is about value creation, market impact, leverage, and measurable results. And when you evaluate that statement through that lens, the conclusion becomes unavoidable. They did not stand on business. They stood on the success of someone else and attempted to repackage it as their own achievement. For nearly 3 decades, the league operated within a financial ecosystem that was, at best, modest and, at worst, completely dependent on external support. The television deals were limited, the audience reach was inconsistent, and the overall cultural relevance struggled to break into the mainstream in a sustainable way. This is lives to building something from the ground up, but effort alone does not determine outcomes in a business environment. The harsh reality is that the measurable outputs simply did not align with the level structures rather than independent revenue dominance. That was the established baseline for years, and it remained largely unchanged. This was not gradual growth, and it was not the result of a long-term strategic rollout. It was a sudden, explosive surge that disrupted the existing equilibrium and forced every stakeholder to reevaluate the true market value of the product. Viewership numbers began to spike in ways that could not be ignored. Arenas that previously struggled to fill seats suddenly became packed with paying fans. Merchandise sales surged as demand skyrocketed, and social media engagement reached levels that signaled a completely new level of cultural penetration. Corporate sponsors, who had previously approached the space with caution, began aggressively positioning themselves to capitalize on the momentum. This was not a coincidence. This was a direct response to a new form of value entering the system. When television networks and media partners make decisions, they do not rely on narratives or emotional appeals. They rely on data, projections, and the potential for return on investment. The sudden willingness to renegotiate and dramatically increase the scale of